All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are going to have a lot of fun today, I think. Um, Today is session 4, and in this session, we're going to talk about sex, which is an awesome subject. So during this session, I'm going to give you some bonus resources that Amanda has ready to send out and some reading recommendations that can really make a difference in the way you view sex, the way you engage in sex, and the way you manage this area of your marriage. So it'll be a really, actually, a really important session out of these 5 that we're doing. So welcome again, and so good to see all of you really invested in your marriage and in particular this area of your marriage. So this is an area that I work with in my practice because essentially all the couples I see for other problems eventually share with me that their sex life is in trouble, pretty non-existent at times. In fact, there's a growing number of couples that don't sleep in the same room. Some for very legitimate reasons, and that's perfectly fine. But many just because they've drifted apart in the bedroom. And so that's concerning. So everything I'm going to talk about today in terms of sex starts with this very basic premise at the top of page 2 in your workbook. Sex is a good gift from a good God. So I'm going to say that again. Sex is a good gift from a good God because we have a hard time believing that sometimes, right? And some people might ask, so if sex is a good gift and it's a good God and everybody wants good sex, it's something that we aspire to and hope for, why do I struggle so much in this area of our relationship, right? We might ask that question. And I'm putting myself and my relationship at the center of this conversation because it's an area that most couples struggle with. And I don't want to come from a place of having all the answers or not understanding where couples are coming from when they talk to me about their struggles in this area. The good news is that if we can deal with this issue head on and sooner than later in our marriage, it can move from a source of great pain and hurt to a source of joy and fun. And that's our goal. So there is hope. You don't need to feel stuck in this area. Okay. So let's just have an honest conversation about intimacy and sex this afternoon. Excuse me. And this is a very big, complex subject. And we won't have time to talk about everything today. So I'm going to focus primarily on what's working against us in this area. The 2 perpetual issues that we've been talking about in each of our of the sessions, our differences and our propensity to drift. So I'm going to structure the sessions around that. But just before I get there, you'll see in your workbook on page 2, there's a heading called Deeper Issues. And even deeper than the issues of differences and drift, what really attacks couples in there together for a good marriage is what we call the 3 A's, the big 3 A's. And that is, if you want to fill that in, addictions, abuse, and adultery. Right. And I just want to name these for this purpose, that if one or more of these are present in your relationship or a relationship that you know of, there needs to involve a third party professional in here to help. These are very toxic matters. They're very complicated matters. Trust me, I have walked people through these problems. I've seen people who struggle in these areas, especially adultery. But these are not death sentences. I want to put this out there that these are not things that you can address in one session or a 5-session workshop. So if you find yourself in this place or know someone who is, you can just send me a private email and I can direct you to people that could help you. I just don't want you feeling hopeless right now. Okay. So the truth is that it's best that these three A's never enter a relationship, but we live in a broken world, isn't that right? And this can happen, but be encouraged. Don't give up hope. Get serious help, like I said, for serious issues, these serious issues. As Christians, we believe that by God's grace and his healing power and wise trained people in our corner, we can overcome all of these things or anything. Okay, so the message is don't lose hope, but don't underplay these three things. Okay, so let's talk now about drift and differences. These are the more common issues that most of us bump up against. So let's just start with a drift. So there are currents at work in our sexual relationship as well. We've been talking about currents. We pick up distorted views about sex in our culture. There are currents in our culture that we can get swept up in that really skew our thinking in the area of sexuality. Typically in our culture, either sex is too big of a deal or not a big a deal enough. It's almost like we're conditioned to expect too much from sex, or that it's the only important thing in a relationship, or it's not a big deal at all. It's just sex, two bodies, no big deal. What's the big deal, right? And I'm here to say that none of these things are true, but those currents can carry us in the wrong direction and essentially affect the way that we think about sex in our relationship. We can also pick up distorted views of sex from our family of origin, right? This or this subculture that we were raised in. A lot of us were, might have been raised in a pretty conservative Christian subculture, and there could have been a very clear understanding of good girls versus bad girls. That good girls didn't have sex and bad girls did. So it's pretty easy to connect the dots and say, well, sex is bad then, right? And sometimes this isn't the intended message, but sometimes these currents can become part of our way of thinking. And some subcultures and some families of origin are even more shame-based and make sex a really dirty kind of hidden shame-based topic. They don't even talk about it at all. And there's a story that comes to mind, and I heard this story told about two sisters that were raised in kind of a really repressive, conservative, don't talk about it, don't think about it, definitely don't do it kind of environment. And it impacted them as they grew older. And as young women, these two sisters decided that they were not going to get married. They didn't need men in their lives, so they decided to just live together, just the two of them. They weren't going to have sex. There were going to be no men in the picture, but they did decided to get a cat, a female cat, in fact. They didn't even let the cat out because they were afraid that she would bump into maybe a tomcat or something, and you know what could happen with that. So they had some serious hangups about sex, but it just so happened that one of the sisters began dating a guy from work, and it became serious. And one day she announced to her sister that they decided to get married. And the sister was certainly shocked, but didn't really think that it would ever happen. And on the night before the wedding, she realized that it was actually going to happen. Wow, her sister was actually going to do that after everything that they had decided. And so she sat her sister down and said, I know what's going to happen. You're going to get married tomorrow, and then you're going to go on a honeymoon, and your husband's going to make you have sex, and you're going to hate it. So here's the deal. Wherever you are, no matter where you are, send me a message, and I'll come and get you and bring you back home. So the wedding happened, and the sister did go on her honeymoon. And 4 days later, she sends her sister a text with only 4 words. And she wrote, "Let the cat out!" Exclamation mark. Let the cat out. So it's a funny story. Love the story. But the point is that um, um, it helps us see that in an attempt to protect our children from sexual activity or the idea of sex at all, we might actually make them ashamed of it. And this isn't God's plan. Sex is a good gift from a good God. So we need to get back to the garden when Adam and Eve moved around naked and not ashamed. So we need to remember that. Then there's external currents, other things that are at play. We talk a lot about busyness, job stress, financial stress, just having kids around. These are all external things. There's no one at fault. There's no villain. It just is what it is. Sometimes it's a seasonal thing, like accountants at tax time, farmers at harvest time, teachers at exam time, parents with kids all the time. There are seasons where your schedule just kind of takes over. And typically what I tell young couples who are raising small kids, and they might ask, is this the end of sex? Is this it? And I tell them, no, you're just in a season where it may be not as often as you might like, and it may be not as long and elaborate as you might like, but just keep that pilot light burning. And when the season is over, you can just turn that fireplace back out or that furnace back up again. And but if you don't keep that pilot light burning, there's nothing to turn on. So whatever that looks like for you as young couples, just manage that and keep that pilot light going. So now let's talk about internal currents. So insecurity is the first one there, and it's a big deal for most people. We're all insecure. We're maybe more insecure than we'd like to let on, and insecurity really affects our ability to enjoy sex the way God designed it, because the best sex happens when you feel the safest, right? Physical intimacy is a place of great vulnerability, and the safer you feel in your relationship, the more secure you feel, and the more open and free you're going to be in your lovemaking. Makes sense, right? So there's a direct connection there, and I've seen it happen with the couples that I work with. So help your partner feel safe and secure. Okay, so anything we can do to bolster the security of our partner will affect our physical oneness. So things like, doing our very, very best to make sure our spouse knows that we're attracted to them and committed to them, that we're here, you're the one that I love and I would marry you over and over again. And it's just not words that we say, but it's actions that back up that kind of faithful commitment. That's a wonderful place for us to grow a stronger and more enjoyable sex life. So do your best at all times to make your spouse feel attractive and desired. Statistics say that women in particular, so just this is for the guys, right? Guys, listen to this. Women need a lot of encouragement to make sure that they know that you still find them attractive and desirable. They say the average woman has 13 negative thoughts about her body a day. That's a lot. I wonder, guys, how many negative thoughts about your body do you have per day? Any ideas? Zero? Probably. I mean, guys, it seems like guys don't think about it the way that we do. Guys always think that they're hot, or at least they do at times when they think something's going to happen. And this is maybe a bit of a stereotype, and it may not fit for all guys, but there's some research to back it up. But the point is that that sense and that need for security really matters when we're trying to build a great love life. And that's an internal current, security, okay? And security is related to trust, being a trustworthy person. Have you ever imagined that can affect your love life, being a trustworthy person, having integrity, keeping your word, and that it does have an impact. And that kind of leads me into the next point. Um, I want to talk about pornography because it's a really big subject. It's a subject that comes up in my therapy room a lot. The common position among many of my male clients is that there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, some even say that it's good for the relationship. So I have to share with them how it is negatively affecting their marriage in a big way. But I have to do it kind of tactfully and very sensitively, so that I don't give off a Christian bias or a gender bias or a personal bias. And I have to be very careful not to give a message that elicits shame, because when somebody feels ashamed about something, they tend to go to their escape behaviors to deal with those feelings, which is often even more pornography, and then they feel worse about it. So it is a sensitive cycle. So I have to be particularly mindful of that and very sensitive and empathetic with the people I'm trying to help. And I want to do that right now as well. But the truth is that this is a really big deal, a massive deal in our culture. I'm not even talking about the issue of users supporting an industry that objectifies women, but also one that is a front for sex trafficking of women and children and child pornography. It may seem harmless sitting in front of a screen, but is brutally and mercilessly hurting God's women and men and girls and boys and babies. And I hate to be so brutal right now, but it's the sad reality in this broken world. So we need to repent about that. And so I do believe that pornography is wrong and it's a sin. But for now, I just like to come at this from another angle, and that is that if you want amazing sex, like the best sex that you could possibly have, is get pornography out of your life. And here's why. Here's the way that sex works, okay? I'm not going to go through the basics because I'm sure and I trust that you all know the basics. But God has made this incredible thing that when a man and a woman make love and there's an orgasm, you get this flood of a hormone called dopamine. We all know that hormone. It's a hormone that has a lot to do with that part of your brain that does reward motivation behavior. And so it's really kind of an addictive thing. So when a couple makes love and they experience the joy of being with each other and they orgasm, they get flooded with dopamine, it makes partners addicted, of course, in the good sense of the term. They're addicted to the cause of that pleasure, right? And that's the way the body is wired up. Now, it's such a genius thing that God has created. If you see, um, um, you're faithful to the same partner for your entire life, you become increasingly addicted to them. That's a great thing. That is an awesome thing. And it even gets better because after the dopamine release that you get, the secondary rush is oxytocin. And that is, we all know about that. It's a bonding hormone, or the cuddle hormone, some people call it. It's a hormone that floods a woman's body when she is nursing her baby. It bonds the mother and the baby. And there's only one time when a man's oxytocin level approaches that of a woman's, and it's right after sex. So girls, this is the perfect time to talk to your husband, to ask him for what you want, um, unless of course he falls asleep, which is also a byproduct of the rush of oxytocin and another hormone called vasopressin or something like that, vasopressin, because their release frequently accompanies the release of melatonin. They usually go together, which is the primary hormone that regulates our body clocks. Oxytocin is also thought to reduce stress levels, which again leads to relaxation and sleepiness. So this is just a little aside in case you were wondering why all of a sudden your partner falls asleep and starts to snore, just in case. Anyway, so again, so sex within a marriage will make your marriage stronger. You become addicted to your partner, you become more bonded to your partner, which makes you want more of your partner. But here's the trick. Your body can release those chemicals whenever you have an orgasm. And you can become addicted or bonded to whatever gives you that pleasure, to another person, to computer, to images, to fantasy. So when we allow that in our marriage, you diffuse that addiction, right? You sort of kind of, you're bonded to your spouse, but you're also bonded to these other things. And so see how it can take away from the intimacy with your partner. See how it can take away from what God designed. So again, if you want to have great sex, you want to enjoy this great gift from a good God, do everything that it takes to get pornography out of your marriage. And we have to stand together as a community on this. It's a huge cultural issue and a family issue. Did you know that well, maybe I should ask you, when do you think is the average age for first exposure to pornography? And this is Canadian statistics. Is that 8?
8,
8.
8 to 10.
Yeah. Yeah. 8 to 10, say 9 to 11, somewhere around there. Pretty close. Yeah. So we need to protect our children. They're completely unprepared to be exposed to pornography at that young age. It shapes their minds, it imprints on their minds and affects them into their futures. And it will eventually affect their marriage relationship too one day. So praise God that there are ways to get back from that habit. But you need to acknowledge that it's a problem. Okay. So typically when I talk to men, their first response might be, oh, you know what, it's not affecting my marriage. My wife doesn't even know about it. And I tell them it is affecting the marriage. Even if she doesn't know, she may find out and it will break her heart and she will feel betrayed. And if you think it isn't affecting your marriage, you're mistaken. So men tell me that they have some men tell me that they have trouble even being aroused by their own partners. That they can only be aroused by images and videos and stuff. So you might say, well, I'm not that far down. Like that doesn't happen to me, and that's great. But take steps now so that it doesn't get out of control. And women are increasingly becoming users too, but men are still by far the largest group. So it's an issue that we all really have to contend with. And want to add just one more thing on this before we move on. If your partner ever confesses to you that this is going on, can I just advise you, I don't give advice, but this time I will, to handle that conversation, that disclosure with as much grace as you possibly can. Because here's the thing, how you handle that first response is going to determine how you navigate through that trial together. And that honesty is what you can use to change things for you. Start seeing it not as your partner's problem, as his or her issue, but as your issue together. I don't know who I'm talking to right now, but if you or any of you have struggled with this and are now in a better place, thank you so, so much for doing the work, the hard work of getting it out of your relationship, out of your marriage. It's very difficult because some people have had this imprinted from a very young age, and it's super, super hard to get out. So it's worth the work to get it out and gone and buried. And then there are health issues. They can be a factor, and we're talking about physical health, from erectile dysfunction to hormone imbalance to chronic pain to mental health, taking certain prescription medications. All these can come in to come to play in our sexual relationship. And these are all going to affect that relationship. I work with couples who suffer from ED and PE, erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation in particular, not due to medical conditions. And I use a therapy called sexual retraining to help them return to a more satisfying sexual experience. And that really, is a game changer for them. External experiences that impact mental health, like grief and loss, postpartum, anxiety disorders, all of these things come into play as well. So many times couples suffer in silence with these conditions. They're not, or situational things. They're not enjoying their sex life, and and uh, there's these issues right before them or difficulties before them, and they think it's them, or they think there's something wrong with them. So please seek a medical professional. Don't suffer forever alone. Get some help, because when you can restore health, you'll grow in your togetherness in really, really big ways. And then the other thing that doesn't fit neatly into a category is past traumatic experiences. For example, things like sexual abuse, molestation, rape. These are things that were done to us. They're external things, but they affect us internally also in a very big way. They can change the way we see ourselves. They can change the way we see our partner. They can change the way we see sexuality. We just need to be very honest about it. And I've walked this journey with a number of women in my practice who have been sexually abused and molested and have really fought hard for healing and freedom from the bondage of this trauma. And those who have mustered the courage to get professional help will tell you that it's worth the work, because whoever robbed you of your childhood or your adolescence has no business robbing you of your adulthood either, as well as robbing you of your marriage that God intended for you to have. So please fight for yourself and for your healing as much as you can and as soon as possible. You know, I feel bad about leaving it here because this is a bigger topic. But you know, if there's more that you need to know about that, again, you can message me. And then we have our past experiences that we actually chose, right? Those of us have sexual junk in our past. We made bad decisions in our younger years, had relationships that were dysfunctional. We've brought all of that baggage, and somehow it's all wrapped up in this kind of shame, guilt package that's affecting our relationship. And here's what I want to say to you, okay? If you're a Christian and you have all that stuff in your past and you've looked at it and you've acknowledged it and you've actually confessed it, I suggest, well, if you have looked at God in the eye and said, look, I was wrong, I'm sorry, I've changed my ways, please forgive me, God, then be assured that that same God of creation has looked you in the eye and said that you are forgiven, that you're as white as snow, and that um, that is out of mind for the God that heals and that forgives. And so that stuff is taken away from you, as far as the East is from the West. And so many of us are just being weighed down by stuff that has long been forgiven. So let's live in that freedom and enjoy relationship that God wants us to have, naked and unashamed, again. So enough of that heavy stuff. That's not my favorite part, so we'll move on. But those are things that lead to drift. And now we're going to talk about differences. Okay, so we're going to name three. The first one is physiological difference. And this is science-based, right? Men are different than women, right? This just in new information. Men are different than women. Men have 300 times the testosterone in their bodies that women have. 300 times. That's a lot more testosterone. I wonder if that's fair. That probably is. Anyway, on average, from the beginning of sexual arousal to orgasm, on average, okay, women take 17 minutes start to finish, okay? 17 minutes. That's a long time for some men. Men, on the other hand, start to finish, guess, what do you think? Start to finish for men between the time of a sexual arousal and orgasm? Can anyone guess? Put up your hand. Anyways, you could probably put up your fingers on one hand to answer this question. Any guess? There's a three, no, is that a four? Three? I can't see. Oh, my glasses. I don't need any glasses. Do that again. 3. Okay, that's pretty close. Well, it's 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And some men probably are thinking right now, I can beat that. 2 minutes, guys. It's not a race. It's mind-boggling. It's the average. That's an average, 2 minutes. Okay, so think about that. So there's a big physiological difference that you have to pay attention to. So if you're going to be mutually satisfied, if you're both going to look forward to your sex life, you're going to have to figure out how to close that gap between 17 minutes and 2 minutes. Now, the good news is that as you're trying to close that gap or figure it out, it's a fun project to work on, right? Yeah. But anyway, so you have to pay attention to this, and you're not the same. You don't warm up the same. You don't react the same. You've heard that, a microwave, crock pot, or slow cooker, or whatever. You've heard that. We have to respect physiology. And then there are other differences like erogenous zones, differences in arousal. So we're going to let a video speak to this, and it's kind of a weird video, and the quality is not that great, but it's a really funny one. And she's wearing these weird ears, so please just ignore that. She's wearing these animal ears. I don't know why. It's just I don't know. Anyways, you can try to decide for yourself. Anyway, so she's got some good things to say. Let's hear that.
How many of you do this? You walk in the door at night and you go, "Hi, I'm home." And then the dog comes up and it's, "Oh, g'day, mate. Hello, darling." And the person you just went to is going... And I've had only women come up to me after conferences and they say, "Do you know, sometimes I lie on the floor next to the dog." Hoping I get the same attention. And the men go, "Yeah, but the dog's pleased to see me." Well, they're usually pretty pleased to see you as well either. It doesn't matter. What you've got to do is make sure when you come in the door at night, you have some energy. Walk in the door and give the person a 7-second kiss and hug. Oh, how long? It's only 7 seconds, it's not 7 minutes. And for the men, don't put your watch behind a head counter. This is not a good idea for you engineering minds. Now, the last little piece that I want to share with you is a little bit, remember, forgive her, she's an Aussie, okay? But it's so important because nobody does it. You know John Gray, don't you? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Well, I did a big speaking tour with John Gray, and he taught me about the male side of this and allowed me to speak about it. I already knew the female side. But there are 2 things in particular men don't know about women. And the first is that women need 10 non-sexual touches a day. And you cannot go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nor can you, as one man said, "Can I go 10? Now, I am doing this piece for your husbands, okay? The second big complaint women have about men is this: "He only ever touches me when he wants sex." And the rooms always go really quiet if there's lots of men, because all the men are going, "Oh, she knows." Yes, guys, it's a pretty common complaint. Now, this is the piece that no one ever teaches us, that if we knew, it can transform our lives. So up to the age of 12 or 13, boys and girls have sensory receptors all over our bodies. And about 12 or 13, testosterone kicks in. And it sucks in the boy's body all the sensory receptors out of the top half of his body. And it sucks all the sensory receptors out of the bottom half of his body, and it focuses them in one spot. Now, women don't know this because we have sensory receptors all over our bodies. So we come into a relationship with a man, we think he's just like a woman. So we're touching his chest, his arms, his back, not that spot, down to the leg, other leg, Men have no idea what's going on. So after a while, the man goes, oh, here, look, boof, bang. And the first time this happens to us, we go, ah! But we get used to it. And so, you know, ladies, you might as well face it. You can muck about up here for a while, you can muck about down here, but spend the bulk of your time. And get them. Don't you fellas tell me I didn't give you anything specific. Now, for the women in the room, what men don't know is that women have sensory receptors all over our bodies. But men have never been taught that. They never think about it. They never talk about it in pubs. They never taught it. So they come into a relationship with a woman thinking we're just like a man. No worries. I know how to turn her on. Woof, woof, bang. And some of you, I think you're in the bath. You know, it's like, oh, no, 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 no. See? The women are clapping. Pay attention, fellas. If you knew how we hated this, if you had any hate this, you have got to go everywhere except the bits, okay? If you touch one of the bits, you've got to go, sorry, mistake, sorry. You have to get us to the point where we're going, touch the bits, touch the bits. Isn't that true? Yeah. Get the audience.
Okay, touch the bits. Okay, I have nothing to say about that video. In fact, I take no responsibility for it. But you can admit that it's funny and there's some tips in there, maybe. But you can see how you can maybe close that 17 to 2 minute gap through that video, maybe, who knows. Okay, so the second one is that if you want to fill it in your workbook is love language. And I'm not going to talk about particularly about Gary Chapman's fantastic book, The 5 Love Languages, which you all should read or should have read by now, which really teaches about how to speak your partner's love languages. But the principle is it's very common for one partner to say, I want to make love to you so that I feel close to you. And it's very possible that the other person is saying, I need to feel close to you before I make love to you. So you see the difference? So, and I hear that all the time. And both parties want to feel close. They have a common desire, but it just works differently, like the chicken or the egg analogy, right? Sometimes couples can misunderstand each other if one wants to reconnect through sex and the other wants to reconnect in order to have sex. So you see, one might feel rejected and not feel desired, and a lot of tension can accumulate. So the premise of love languages is that we tend to show love the way we want to receive it. And so we think we're showing love, but we're not showing it in the way that our partner wants to receive it. We're just different. In that way. So it's a good idea to find out how different you are and then just to embrace it. Another thing that some couples need to navigate is if one partner's love language is physical touch, you may think that's the way to show your partner, like kissing and hugging, patting your partner's bottom and groping them or whatever it is, just being all over them. But if your partner's love language is words of affirmation and you're doing all that physical touch while your partner then is responding with words of affirmation, you're missing the mark, right? You're not reaching the bullseye. You're both not getting what you need and hope for, and that can really cause distance and drift, right? You may have come from a family that was not very touchy-feely, right? I certainly didn't, and there wasn't much hugging and kissing and physical affection. So when you get married, there's no category for that for some people, for all that physical touch that your partner wants. So sometimes you have to kind of retrain your brain to think in those terms and remind yourself daily, like, I must touch Dave, I must kiss Dave, must hug Dave. I've heard it said that we need to touch our spouse, and I've said this before, at least 12 times a day. 12 times a day. It really is a learning experience for many couples. Again, for the partner whose love language is touch, they have to learn and accept. This is really important for all of you that have that physical touch is your number one love language. You have to learn and accept that not every touch needs to lead to a touchdown, to something else, right? Because what happens is for the spouse with the lower libido, it makes it dangerous for them to touch their partner with the higher sex drive. And so they don't want to take the risk and are even afraid to do so, right? We all have issues in this area. And the point is that if we want to grow in this good gift, we're going to have to deal with our differences. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's just different, but we could learn to deal with these differences. If we could learn, it would really be a good thing. Okay. So the next one, speaking of libido, then there are libido differences, sex drive differences. And this is where many, many couples really struggle, and it could be a very lonely place for many partners. It can be at the heart of much of the conflict in some marriages. It's a very common issue. It's something that changes over time. So your libido or sex drive can change over time. So I'd like to talk about this for a bit. We have different, so we know that we have different sex drives, different libidos. How do we deal with it? You know, in 30% of the cases, men have the higher libido. So here's the cycle. The higher libido person wants to make love. The lower libido person doesn't want to make love as often. The higher libido person feels rejected. When they get hurt, they get then they get angry, and there's nothing sexy about an angry man or an angry woman, which makes the lower libido person less inclined to go to bed with them, which makes the higher libido partner feel even more rejected, even more hurt, and even more angry. It becomes this vicious cycle, and around and down goes that sex cycle. So here's what typically is going on. The higher libido person is almost always in a state of constant frustration, right? Often feeling rejected and discouraged. They feel like they always have to push, or they'll never ever have sex. And they have no control over the very thing that is most life-giving to them, right? If that's their main love language, okay? In the lower libido person, here's what's going on. They almost always feel harassed. They may feel like there's something wrong with them. They feel frigid or defective. I've heard it described as, I feel like I'm never going, or I'm sorry, I feel like I'm never enough. And like I'm failing the person I love most on this planet and the thing that matters to them most. And let me just tell you, it's an awful way to spend your married life. It's no fun being a low libido person. And both partners start to feel like this piece of their marriage, the sexual relationship is the defining piece of their marriage. And that everything is bound up in this one particular area. It colors everything after a while, right? I mean, that's all we see. It's a terrible common conundrum that many couples find themselves in. And here's 3 things that can help couples navigate the libido difference. And this is not in your workbook. The first thing is honest conversation. You know, the aha moment or turning point for many couples when they talk honestly about this is when they come to the same side of the table. Remember that table analogy? Coming to the same side of the table, and when they quit thinking that that you're when how do I put it? You quit thinking that your partner with low libido is the problem, or your partner with the higher libido is the problem because he or she wants too much. When partners finally listen and finally understand that they aren't the only person hurting, that's when things start to turn around, because typically each partner thinks that they're the only one. If you're the one not getting enough sex, you might think, oh, poor me, I deserve to be angry. She's denying me, she's rejecting me. I'm justified. You have this whole victim thing going on. But when partners come around to the same side of the table and then realize that the spouse they love more than anything in this world also feels discouraged, feels like they're not enough, feels like a failure, you can't help but soften your heart to that, right? And again, I want to go back to that word empathy that I used last session. If you can feel empathy for your partner and what they're going through, you still, I mean, you still have to figure out all the libido different stuff, but all of a sudden your partner isn't your enemy anymore. So if you're both hurting, what can you do together as a team on the same side to stop hurting? Right? That's the question. It just changes the whole dialogue and dynamic when you consider the other person's perspective. At the end of this session, I'm going to give you some homework, which is a conversation guide, and it's homework to be done on your own, not in the session. And that will hopefully help you to have an honest conversation about your sexual relationship. And it could be a really great start for you to where you can navigate whatever it is between the two of you, and it'll take you to a really good place. So honest conversation, that's the first thing. Then the second thing is you could do is to navigate this libido difference is to put sex on the calendar. Take out a calendar and write it down, right? The guys will write it down Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And no, you're not doing that. But you might think that this is not very romantic because you want it to be spontaneous, because you're so in love, and so it should be spontaneous. But when you're overly busy, you're maxed out, you're not in a great place, you have to decide that this is important for your marriage, that will bring life to it. And so you have to make some time for it. So like everything else in your life, put it on the calendar, right? Schedule sex. And this doesn't mean that you have to do this for for a very long time. It's really for a season. It just really kind of helps things get back to where it feels manageable for some couples. So here's what happens. Let's say you pick Tuesday as the day that you decide to have sex. The lower libido person wakes up on Tuesday morning and says, okay, today is the day. Okay. All right. Today is the day. Because most of the time for the lower libido person, it's not that they don't enjoy it. It's because once they're engaged in it, it's usually pretty great. And it's the problem is getting to it, right? Getting to or showing up for it. Most of the problem is between the ears, right? It's in the brain. And if you have the focus that, or if you know that today's the day that you're going to make love, then you plan your day, you clear the deck, you clean out all the clutter, you save your energy, you make sure that you're going to be available, and you're going to make it a priority at the end of the day, right? On the other hand, the higher libido person, they'll probably wake up and say, yes, today is the day. Yeah. And so they go to work, and they look forward to quitting time, and then they kind of they turn down any overtime because they have to go home because today's the day. So when you do get home, guys, help with dinner, help put the dishes away, help with laundry, help with bathing the kids, help putting the kids to bed, make sure the kids stay in bed and don't decide to crawl into your bed in the middle of the night. And can I just say that couples who allow their children to sleep with them past the age of, I don't know, 1 or 2, are really doing a disservice to their marriage and to their children, right? Children in the marital bed are real sex killers, And I have to tell you, some parents have confessed to me that it's an avoidance tactic. As long as the kids are in their bed, they don't have to have sex. And some husbands actually end up sleeping in another room because there's no space for him. And this is really sad, and that really has to change. So putting sex on the calendar eliminates a lot of the silly games couple play, the couples play, the walking on eggshells, wondering, the pushing, the pressure, because what happens is that Wednesday morning comes around, and for the lower libido person thinks, it's a free day. It's a free day. I can do whatever I want. You can have the whole day to cuddle, and to kiss, and to hold hands, and get as close as you want without feeling like it's going somewhere else. And it really takes the pressure off it. It puts energy back and lightness back into that area of your relationship that may have become contentious and painful. So understand that it's not recommended as a long-term strategy, but in the short term, it works really well for many couples. But one word of caution. If you're going to calendarize sex, just don't leave it on the kitchen table. If you have kids, and they'll look at the calendar and say, "Mom, Dad, why is there a smiley face every Tuesday? What is that? What does that mean?" So you don't want to have that conversation. So careful with that. So the third thing is that helps with the libido gap is the art of the quickie. Now, this isn't in your workbooks, and don't tell anybody I told you. Oh, it's being recorded. Oops. Okay, anyway, what this means is that both people don't have to have an orgasm. One or the other of you can. It's not always the man, even though that's what we think, but it doesn't have to be the man. It doesn't need to take hours. It's not this long drawn out session of sensual pleasure. It's just a quickie, right? It's just a quickie, fast food, right? Mixed sex. So it's not a bad thing. It's not a long-term strategy, but it's a way, if you've drifted far apart, to find your way back together. And it's a way to narrow the libido gap. Here's the one thing about it though, it has to be offered, right? It has to be offered. And this is really important. It has to be offered. And your partner, okay? It has to be offered by the lower libido person as a gift to the higher libido partner, as a way of closing that gap. Otherwise, it can border on abuse. And I'm really serious about this. If it's demanded or expected, it borders on abuse. But if it's given as a free gift of love in order to narrow the gap, it's a good option. And here's another piece of advice. If you're the higher libido person and your lower libido partner offers you the gift, take the gift. Don't feel proud or guilty. They offered it to you, and it's their way of trying to navigate this difference. So take the gift, trust me. So moving on, here's the important thing. How do we deal with differences? How do we deal with these differences? We've talked about how to deal with libido differences, but differences in general. We're going to go back to those two terms that I used a couple of sessions ago. Understanding and appreciating. Partners need to listen to their partner, to their spouse, instead of only seeing it from from their point of view. Both partners need to understand each other's position, which gives them a platform really to start to try to solve the issue together. Okay. Appreciating is the other piece. And here's where it gets a little harder. We have to learn to appreciate those differences. And it's hard sometimes because those differences are creating a lot of tension between us, a lot of friction in the relationship, but we have to change our mindset to start seeing the good, the potential good in those differences. So it's important to note that these physiological differences in men and women, these are good things, right? They teach us to be really attentive to our partner. They teach us to know their body very well. They teach us to know what our partner needs, to take the time to understand, to practice. And in some cases, it teaches us to deny ourselves or slow ourselves down and pay attention to our partner. It's a really good thing. Different libidos could also be another um, like it could be good in another way, and that is if you both have the same libido, you could easily drift for years and not even notice how far you've gotten. So one partner has the partner that has if one partner has a stronger sexual drive, it's a good thing because it may be the one thing that actually pulls you back together. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 Ps dealing with drift. The first one is priority. So you have to make it a priority to go after health and wholeness in this area. It's really worth it. If you had past experiences, like difficult things that have happened to you, please go and get some help so that you can get back to making sex a priority for the sake of your relationship. Um, make time for your sexual, carve out time in your busy schedule. Like I said, calendarize it for a while, come up with creative things, figure out a way to build it into your life. Lower libido people, you need to make it enough of a priority that you can actually occasionally step out of your comfort zone and initiate sex. It's hard, yeah, but we need to put our big girl panties on, okay? Or the small ones, maybe. I don't know, whatever you prefer. And actually take some initiative. Our spouse does not want to be placated. They don't. They all they want is to be desired, and initiating shows that desire from time to time. Invite God into your sexual relationship, right? Some people pray before. I don't do that, but some people pray before they have sex. Some people pray that they will have sex. So, but invite God into that area of your life. Um, um, and then the second piece is passion. Passion, so many connotations in around this word in our culture. If you look at movies, passion might look like uh, ripping clothes off and lamps go flying, and that typical one where I always wondered about that, where they just throw everything off the desk and it all falls on the floor, and everything crashes, and that's crashes, and that's passion. But the heart of passion is not that. That's not it. The heart of passion, and John Gottman talks about this, that you have a deep desire for this person that's next to you, and this person alone, and that you pay attention to what pleases your partner. Become a student of your spouse, the kinds of things that pleases and arouses him or her, and you're focused on that. I think that is passion, that you've thought of your husband, that you remember what's important to your wife, that you build an ongoing friendship. I think that that's really passionate. I think that's the heart of it all. Okay. Um, variety. A variety can really help, and a little more creativity can put some passion back in. Len wanted me to show some props, but I decided not to. So once again, because you thought of your partner and trying to bring some variety into your sex life, it's a good thing. This is a sticky subject because sometimes in our Christian worldview, we may think this is wrong or dirty or perverse, or I don't know. But sometimes when we've been married a long time, it's pretty easy to fall into this routine. The same thing every single time. You know what I mean, right? Like you start here and then you go there and then that body part, and then you move there and then you turn around and then you face the wall and then you face the ceiling and then your leg goes here, your leg goes there. And it's the same. You know the drill, right? We don't want that. So sometimes we get into this routine. And so every once in a while, it's good to try and mix things up, try something new, try a game, try a new outfit, try a flavor, try a new bed sheets, try candles or some new music or so on and so on. So give it a try. And it may not work, and you might both agree that you're never going to do that again. It just didn't really do anything for you, but at least you tried to spice it up. And that really says a lot about, and it can't be only one coming up with the ideas. It has to be both kind of making that effort. Okay. So passion, build passion, and then make it playful. And playfulness is so important. We're supposed to enjoy each other. Think about it. God could have created the sexual relationship to be orgasmless, joyless, right? Just for procreation, but he didn't do that. He made it so that it bonds us. He made it so that it brings us pleasure and joy, and and it's recreational, and it's a really good gift, and that's how he designed it, right? I couldn't end this session without a little bit of research, and I'm all about the research. There was an online study conducted, I can't remember when it was. Anyway, I remember it was about 7,000 people in this study over 24 countries worldwide. These people were interviewed to find out what might be different about couples who said that they had a great sex life compared to couples who said that they had a bad sex life. A key finding from this study was this, that couples who have a great sex life everywhere on the planet are doing the same set of things. And couples who do not have a great sex life everywhere on the planet are not doing these things. So here are 13 things that all couples do who have an amazing sex life. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. But they say, I love you every day and mean it. They kiss one another passionately for no reason. They give surprise romantic gifts. They know what turns their partners on and off. Excuse me. Erotically. They are physically affectionate even in public. They keep playing and having fun together. They cuddle. They make sex a priority, not the last item of a long to-do list. They stay good friends. They can talk comfortably about their sex life. They have weekly dates. They take romantic vacations. They are mindful about turning toward each other. Okay, so I'd like you to take a look at this video. John Gottman talks about this.
What have we learned about sex, romance, and passion? And you'd say, well, okay, so, Masters and Johnson did their research and Kinsey did their research, all this research. There's only one thing that discriminates, well, two things that discriminate couples who have a great sex life from couples who have an awful sex life. The first is they stay friends when they have a great sex life. Love maps, fondness and admiration, and turning toward bids. That's what friendship is, okay? Second, they make sex a priority. It's not the last thing on a long to-do list. It's special. They make it important. That's the only thing that's different about couples who have a great sex life and couples who don't.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Another study by the Sloan Center at UCLA studied 30 dual career heterosexual couples who had young children, and discovered that most of these young couples who reported not having a good sexual relationship did these things, okay? Oops, they did these things. They spend very little time together during a typical week. They become job-centered and child-centered. They talk mostly about their huge to-do lists. They seem to make everything else a priority other than their relationship. They drift apart and lead parallel lives and are unintentional about turning toward one another, okay? So, and they also found that these couples spent only about 35 minutes together every week in conversation. And most of their talk was about errands and tasks and that they had to get done. So we put these two studies, if we put them like together, what does it tell us? It says that couples should not avoid one another emotionally, but instead follow these 13 very simple things that couples can do to make their sex lives great. So the point is that great sex is not rocket science, but being good friends, by being physically affectionate, by openly talking about sex, couples can build a thriving relationship inside and out of the bedroom. So I'm sharing with you again this week that resource called 6 Hours to a Better Relationship. I wanted you to make sure you had it on hand. It's a guide to help you carve out time for each other on a weekly basis. And more so, I wanted to draw your attention to what Dr. Gottman calls the 6-second kiss. Now that comedian said 7 seconds. So Gottman says 6, so I'll go with 6. Anyway, he asks couples to incorporate this kiss into their everyday moments of transition, the hellos, the goodbyes. He describes it as long enough to feel romantic and connected with your partner. 6 seconds, that's all it takes. That's not a lot of time out of your busy time schedule. It stops the busyness in your brain and puts your focus on your partner at that moment. So your homework this week is to give this a try. Try the 6-second kiss at least twice a day. When you say hello in the morning, or when they leave for work, when your partner returns from work. So to close, I want to make this very clear. Sex is not the foundation of a good marriage. However, a poor sex life can feel like a curse, especially when the foundation of a marriage has already begun to crack. Happy couples see sex as only one of the many factors influencing the success of their relationship. They have built a foundation and have a well-developed friendship. They admire each other and nurture that fondness. And perhaps most important, when it comes to sex, they have developed a habit of turning toward each other, right? Instead of away from each other. And there's many ways that we can do that. Unhappy couples, on the other hand, have lost touch with each other. They turn away from each other often. With that foundation gone, it's no wonder that sex is one of the first things to suffer in an already crumbling relationship, because it's where we are at our most vulnerable, right? Sex is vulnerability. Desire disappears when we no longer feel connected. Couples' resistance to deal with their sexual issues is really symptomatic of a larger problem, a lack of safety and intimacy. And so we have to deal with that. This is where the other elements of a solid relationship become really crucial, because sex requires, like I said, sex is vulnerability. Sex requires vulnerability and honest communication. So for this to work, both partners must feel safe to voice their insecurities and their needs and their wants. So safety is built by turning toward each other, listening to each other, providing affection. So like I said, I'm going to provide you the 6 Hours to a Better Relationship resource, and then this booklet from the Gottman Institute called Small Things Often. Okay, how to build a positive, lasting relationship through small things often. It teaches couples to do small things, thoughtful things, and repair conflict when it arises, in order to create a path towards intimacy that feels like an intimacy that feels like a free gift and not an obligation or a chore, like it feels sometimes. I'm also going to recommend 3 books written by Christian authors that I think are great guides to a better sexual relationship. The first one that you've probably know, I've mentioned it before, Sex Begins in the Kitchen by Kevin Leman. It's been rewritten. The Sex-Starved Marriage, which is a manual pretty much that I use in my practice, by Michelle Davis. And The Girl's Guide to Great Sex by Sheila Gregoire. All excellent books if you're interested in picking those up. So to end today's session, we've gone over a little bit. I'd like to briefly explain that tool on pages 5 and 6. That's your other piece of homework. So the first one is the 6-second kiss, and then there's this one. The instructions are pretty self-explanatory, but set aside about 60 minutes to do this, where you can just be alone, there are no kids around, and you're going to work through these open-ended conversations. They follow the themes that we've already spoken about in this session. So have an honest conversation. Take all the things that we've talked about in other sessions about communicating, speaking clearly, listening carefully, reflecting. Don't disagree. Don't judge, don't defend, don't criticize your partner's answers. Just ask clarifying questions and probing questions if you need to. This conversation could really turn things around, and it could take you to a different place and take you really, really deeper in your a relationship, in your marriage. So please do this exercise. It's a must. It's a homework that you want to do. It really will bear fruit, and you can keep coming back to it. So here's a final video. It's a 1-minute video that you might find interesting. Again, it's Gottman talking about what we can learn from the animal world.
But what impressed me the most that I want to tell you about was the way porcupines have sex. And it was quite remarkable because the male porcupine has a special problem that no other mammal has. He cannot just mount the female, because if her quills are up, he can really hurt himself. So this is what happened in this film. The male porcupine and the female porcupine sat down in front of each other. And the male porcupine took his paws and put it on the female porcupine's face. And she closed her eyes, and he rubbed her face for a long time. He was really patient. And then, after a while, he went around to the back. Until her quills were down. And then he mounted her. And I think that's really the way to bring the two sections of the bookstore together, is the wisdom of the male porcupine. It's all about emotional communication.
Wow, who knew? We can learn something from a porcupine. Okay, so this is it for today. We're gonna take some